It is my great honor to introduce, it is rare in the National Security Forum that we get to introduce and host the president of a nation, a former president of a nation. And so it is my great pleasure to welcome a very special guest, not only to NSF, but a special guest who I'm sure has a place in the heart of many people in this community. And as Annette pointed out, many of people in the Reno area send their children to study in the Basque Country or Spain or France. And so peace in that region is very important, and it is part of national security for the United States that we understand what national security looks like for our partners around the world. So I am very delighted to welcome President Ibarrexte. And for those of you who do not or have not seen, he has written a fabulous book on sustainable development in the Basque experience, sustaining human development. Sorry, my apologies. And so in order to put this in context for this group, because this is an unusual speaker for us, we have asked our own Bill Douglas to give a little context about why, first of all, why the president is here and why this is an important topic for all of us in the Northern Nevada region. So with that, Bill.
So it is my pleasure and privilege to introduce to you my dear friend, Juan Jose Ibarrexte. You will be hearing from him about his vision for the future of his beloved Basque Country and what it can teach all of us as we strive towards a more worthwhile and productive future for humanity. He now devotes his life to formulating systems for a better world in which we do not destroy this fragile planet in the pursuit of unbridled economic growth. He knows of what he speaks by experience. Juan Jose was an economist by training and factory owner by profession before launching a political career that elevated him to the higher circles of the Basque Nationalist political party. He then became vice president of the Basque Autonomous Community within Spain, and subsequently its Lehendakari, or president, serving in that capacity between 1999 and 2009. He is currently founder and director of the Aguirre Lehendakaria Center for Social and Political Studies of the University of the Basque Country. The Lehendakari's visit to Reno fulfills two objectives. He has long harbored a desire to know firsthand UNR's Center for Basque Studies, particularly since it is the publisher of the English version of Ibarrexte's book, outlining his vision of a possible better future for our planet. Secondly, he will be meeting with officials of UNR to discuss our university's possible entry into the Aguirre Center's international consortium of universities that includes the London School of Economics, McGill University in Montreal, and George Mason and Columbia universities in this country. He was just telling me at breakfast that the center is now working with the European Union, Norway, and Switzerland with an agreement with the Colombian government and FARC to help facilitate the transition of Colombia from its recent period of civil conflict. But I would now share with you not the Lehendakari's laudatory present and ambitious future, but rather his past, that part of his persona and personal history that I am certain that he had no intention of bringing up today. Easily the most notable project of his presidency was the so-called Plan Ibarrexte, or Ibarrexte Plan, that advocated for a Basque country associated freely and by choice with Spain, but with the right to determine democratically its political future, including the possibility of independence. It also demanded complete control by Basques over their legal and fiscal systems and their right to direct representation within the European Union. The Spanish government was appalled and treated the plan as a direct assault upon the country's unity and constitutional order. It went so far as to approve legislation that I would call the Ibarrexte Law, since it singled him out for several years of incarceration should he proceed unilaterally to implement his proposals. In the event, the Basque Parliament approved the plan in 2004, and it was forwarded to the Spanish Parliament, which voted overwhelmingly in early 2005 to not even debate it. At that point, President Ibarrexte, unlike his Catalan counterpart during the past year, opted to work within the system towards eventual approval of the plan, without, however, ever relinquishing his commitment to it over the long term. Indeed, it is fair to say that the Plan Ibarrexte continues to overshadow Basque politics to this day. President Ibarrexte was always opposed to the violence of ETA, and we collaborated closely on an initiative by the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue of Geneva to moderate negotiations between Spain and ETA. I was its consultant, and the first person that I consulted was Juan Jose, and we embarked on an adventure together. But that is a different story that is beyond the scope of today's program. So I now present to you my personal hero, Lehendakari Juan Jose Ibarrexte.
Bueno, etorritako guzti hoi egunon. I'm very happy to be here. And thank you very much for your invitation, and thank you very much, Bill. Not only because your contribution to know the Basque Country abroad has been very important due to your work, but especially because you are a member of the Basque family. And this is very important for me to remark today in this moment. Well, one thing, I'm not a politician. I was the president of my country, not of my country, of the Basque community, because the Basque Country is more than the Basque community. I was the Lehendakari of the Basque community. But the Basque Country is more. It's not only the Basque community, but the community of Navarra and the Pays Basque. But I'm not a politician anymore. In political terms, I am archaeology. I'm a teacher, and my profession is teacher. So, well, my presentation today is this presentation about the being Basque is the answer to the question that you did at that time. Do you remember? Noragoas, where are you going to? And we have no answer yet to that question. And well, in fact, we think that the most important problem that we have nowadays is the lack of diagnosis. So, like a physician, if you don't diagnose how to apply a therapy. In that sense, it's very important to have a diagnosis to solve the problem of inequality, to solve the problem of justice, the lack of justice, to solve the problem that there are a lot of people escaping from war, from poverty, from climate change. And we have no an answer to that kind of questions. And so, like in that moment, Ortega y Gasset, a poet and thinker, a Spanish thinker, say, we don't know what is happening to us, and this is the problem that we have. And from this analysis, we have a question, the most important question that we have today is if another world is possible. What do you think about? Is possible? Because our world is injustice, cruel. We have to change. But the question and the dilemma for the center is very clear, radically, to continue constructing from a position of power, handing over more and more areas to the market, or to find a clear response in order to guarantee the rights of individuals and people. This is the work of our center. In fact, is like an embrace between the most ancient concept, the concept of people, within this concept, the Basque people, and a new one, the sustainable human development. Not only economic agenda, but social, economical, and environmental agenda. And I directed at Columbia University and George Mason University this research program about the Basque Case, which is the intellectual base to create the center, Aguirre Lehendakaria Center. And this is like an embrace between the most ancient and a new one concept. And our idea is, our target is to have a diagnosis. And in that sense, look at the world to see the Basque Country. But with this world map, the world map has changed completely. You can see that in this map, in this map, in the center is Europe. But in fact, there is not yet already in the center. But here, we have a new map, a new world map to address our problems. And, of course, we began in this country, at the Columbia University and George Mason University, and then in Europe with the Basque University, then when other universities all around the world. We are working with the recovery of languages, for example, with the Quechua language in South America, in Cuzco University, or with the recovery of the Mije language in Oaxaca, a state in Mexico. But the idea is to have a diagnosis, and to do that, look at the world to see the Basque Country. And from the Basque Country to the center, see the world. Not this world, but this one. Well, in the second question is what we've learned. First, that in a global society, and to be in a global society, it seems contradictory, but you need to have a local answer. So I put Erantzun Lokala in our language, in the Basque language, one of the most ancient language all around the world. In fact, there are only two Pre-European languages in Europe. One of them is the Hungarian, which is in relationship with the Suomi from Finland, and the second one is the Basque language. In fact, it's very difficult for you to understand only one word if I speak in the Basque language. Nik hitz egiten badut euskaraz, oso zaila izango litzateke zeuentzat hitz bakar bat ere ulertzea. This is our language. The origin is unknown. So it's not similar. The words and the sentences are completely different. And we speak about the formula for a positive vision in relationship with the future. And we think that the formula is this, in which you can see, well, I put it in Spanish, but it's R&D&I, research, development, and innovation. And in relation with this part of the polynomial, you can learn with other experiences, successful experiences all around the world. But in our world, there are no recipes. And if you don't add your own K, the polynomial as a whole doesn't work. So we say that the key is the K is the key. What the K? Because we say in our language, in the Basque language, we say culture with K. You have to add C, you have to add your own K, being the K the key. This is the book. It's reflected in the book. Well, so the Basque Country, at the head of Europe, you can see here the Basque Country. We have 3 communities. One of them is the Basque community, Vizcaya, Gipuzkoa, and Álava, 2.2 million of us. Then Navarra, more or less 500,000 people, and then the Pays Basque in the French state. We are divided in 3 communities in 2 states. The Pays Basque in the north, in the French state, more or less 300,000 people. In total, 3 million of us there. But our diaspora, or diasporas, as you say, at the double, more than 6 million people all around the world, Basque people, all around the world. And not only that, well, we are an age-old people, and we were a reference, for example, for the second president of the United States, because when he was looking for governance systems all around the world, he visited the Basque Country. And when he presented the constitutional basis to the representatives of your society, he said that these extraordinary people, referring to the Basque people, have preserved their ancient language, genius, laws, government, and manners longer than any other nation of Europe. But we are not only an age-old people, but at the forefront of Europe. Here you have the last picture of the European Union, in which you can see in blue different parts of the European Union that are above the average of the European Union in terms of GDP per capita. And you can see here the Basque Country. The Basque Country has more or less now 21, 22 points above the European average in terms of GDP per capita. So not only an age-old people, but at the forefront of Europe. But if we speak about sustainable human development, we have to speak not only about the GDP, but about other measures. And you can see here, for example, according with the last measures in relationship with the Gini index, equality, 1, inequality, 100. Well, here you have the rank of the European Union in relationship with the Gini index, and you can see here the index, the synthetic index of the Basque community, 25. It is more or less in the top 5, 6. Finland, 25, Belgium, 26, Sweden, 25, Denmark, 27, Netherlands, 26. You can see here, for example, Spain, 34. And not only that, but in relationship with extreme poverty, the last figure say that we have, under extreme poverty, the 3.9 of our population. So we have a lot of work to do ahead. But we rank, like in the Gini index, in the top 5 in relationship with Finland, for example. They have, according with the European data, 3.6, Belgium 3.8, Sweden 3.8, Denmark 4.1, and Netherlands 3.8. In our case, 3.9. And not only that, but in relationship with the last publication report made by the United Nations in relationship with the Human Development Index, we rank here in the top 10 with United States and United Kingdom. The 10th position of the world, according with the last data. So, a success story of 30 years of radical transformation. You have here the before and after, and not only that, but the most important thing that due to all these kind of things, the Basque Case have been chosen like a study case in many universities all around the world. In our case, for example, at Columbia University, and I directed this research program, the Basque Case as a comprehensive model for sustainable human development, but it wasn't the first time that the Basque Case was studied, because the first was at Harvard Business School, here in this picture with Michael Porter in 2004. Okay, and the conclusion of this research program was that identity and innovation are the roots and wings for sustainable human development. And not only that, but in the relationship with the Basque Case, the defense of the Basque identity, culture and language is not solely related to a legitimate political fact, such as the claim for an identity in the current globalist world, but it is also related, and more important in this reflection, entirely to the achievement of sustainable human development. From now on, well, this is the position of the Basque Country, the Basque people, the Basque researchers. No. For example, you can see in other parts around the world this idea about the importance, the importance of the culture in development. For example, Helen Clark, he was the president for 10 years in New Zealand, and then the director of development program at the United Nations, and she says that culture is a vital aspect of human development. To live lives that they value, people must be free to choose their identity and thus to define who they are. But not only that, but for example, in the last book, Manuel Castells, Catalan, that is a professor at Princeton University, and he says that all economies are culture, or the American Viviana Selicer says that culture shapes the economy. And not only that, but Harvard Business School, in one report about the culture, says that a culture is like the wind. It is invisible, yet its effect can be seen and felt. When it is blowing in your direction, it makes for smooth sailing. But when it is blowing against you, everything is more difficult. And well, some advices. First is for organizations seeking to become more innovative, be careful, because culture change is often the most challenging part of the transformation. And not only that, but culture change can't be achieved through a top-down mandate. Someone with authority can demand compliance, but they can dictate optimism, trust, and creativity. Well, and now, well, practical policy lessons from this research program. Well, the first one is the necessity to have a vision, all together or not at all. This is the question, like President Rule said, without vision, people perish. So all together or not at all. And we did so in 2001. We defined all together the vision for the country in the 21st century. Second, both human capital. And the boss of human capital has been the key to do the best transformation, political, economic, and social transformation. As you can see in this slide, for example, in the 80s, the 80% of our population hadn't studies or primary studies only. And nowadays, the 85% of our population have secondary or university studies. This is the main reason to understand the transformation of the Basque society. Then time and continuity, 3 phases. We did the first phase in the 80s was learn to compete. Second one was learn to compete and cooperate. And we did the clusterization of our economy with the helping of Harvard University and Michael Porter. And the third one, the phase in we are working now, is learning to innovate in cooperation. And 6 lessons done. First, the concept, a new concept, sustainable human development. Not only economic agenda, but social and environmental. The second one is identity and economics. It's very important. This is the formula for the future, and on the NI, but you have to add the key, the K is the key. Third is commitment to the real economy, because it's related in relation, a positive relationship with social, scientific, and technical innovation. Fourth, peace and economics. In our case, the Basque case is very important because the economic growth and social balance is not a consequence of a formal peace process scenario. In fact, we have not yet a formal peace process scenario in the Basque Country. But we define first the target of the sustainable human development. And if you define this target, it's impossible, the violence in the middle. So in our case, the peace is the consequence of the definition and the vision about the sustainable human development, and not the opposite. Then the fifth is economic growth hand in hand with social balance. This is very important, how to engage people with a transformation. If we don't share well-being, it's impossible. And then six, public-private shared leadership and governance, a vision of country, a bottom-up vision, and like an umbrella, self-government, to take decisions to develop it. Well, new questions arising in which we are working now. First is a new strategy for competitiveness based on solidarity for 2030. Well, up to now, we have debate and take decisions in two tables. One of them is the most important one, about competitiveness. And the second one, about solidarity. And we think that we have to debate and take decisions in the same table, put on the table the two concepts. Because it is impossible to debate and take decisions about competitiveness if you don't about solidarity, or the opposite. If you don't about solidarity, it's impossible to speak about the solidarity if you want to engage people with the transformation. This is the first. The second is the social protection. Normally, here in the United States, sometimes the debate, the electoral debate between Republicans and Democrats are that Democrats are copying the worst of the European Union, the welfare state. And the welfare state, because the welfare state is very bad for the activity, for unemployment rate, and so. But it's not true. It's not true. You can see here, for example, the investment in the welfare state of the different countries of the European Union. And you can see here, for example, that countries that have more or less the investment around 10,000 euros per capita. Like Austria, Germany, Denmark, Netherlands, France, Sweden, Finland, Belgium, even the Basque Country with nearly 9,000. And then you can see here, for example, the countries that has been rescued for the first group of the countries. And the figures are incredible, because if you look at that, the welfare state is, in the case of Spain, Portugal, and Greece, more or less 5,000, 6,000 euros per capita. And the countries that paid the rescue for these countries have the double, around 10,000, 11,000. So it's very important to maintain the welfare state, to maintain the image and the role of Europe in our world. And the third one is an important one, especially here in the States, but not only here. And is that we thought that there was a positive relationship between innovation and inequality. But it's not true, because the last research is about that. For example, here is a colleague from McGill University, and they say that the analysis reveals that there is a positive relationship between innovation and inequality. Be careful. Cities with higher levels of innovation have more unequal distribution of earnings. And from London School of Economics, another college, says that studies of the United States have suggested that the most innovative areas are also the most unequal. Wow. In the European case, is less certain. But, he remarks that the positive relationship between employment and knowledge is in the financial financial services, which is the relationship is not positive but negative. So the third question is that. The fourth is the cultural. What is the role of culture in development? And we have to measure what is the role, what is the importance of the culture in measure. In fact, here we have about that thinking made by Mary Gruen, is a linguistics from at Stanford University, and he says that therefore by the end of the 21st century, the 5,000 languages, more than 5,000 languages that exist today will be reduced to only 500. And then look at the last part, because he's a friend of the Basque Country too, like Bill, no? When he says that one of which will be the Basque language. What is the problem? The problem is that we realize about the economic crisis immediately. Because when you don't have money in our pocket, we have nothing in our brain. There's the question. But we don't realize about the problem, the cultural crisis, which is behind the economic and financial crisis that we are suffering now in our societies all around the world. In fact, in relationship with the Basque Country, this is what is the local answer? Well, the local answer in this moment is that we did, the first stage, was the made in the 80s and 90s. Then we did, the second one, thought in. It isn't enough made, but we need thought, think, and the second step, we did the second step, but now we have to move to the third stage. And the third stage is not only made in or thought in, but for people. For people. This is the question. This is the change that we have to do in this moment. To do so, we have new methods, and the problem is that the paradigm has changed completely. 20 years ago, the lack of information was lack of knowledge. Now is the opposite. It's the abundance of information, the opposite, the lack of knowledge. So there is not a positive relationship between information and knowledge, not at all. It's not true. So this is the question: how to convert information into knowledge. And the question is for the education system is very clear. It's necessary now about things, but it's not enough. So we have to move from knowing to understand. We have to understand because we have online. We have online all around the world the same information. The connected world, because we have no solution already for the not connected world. But for the connected world, we have the same information at the same time. The question is not now about it, but understand. And of course, we have a method, a research method, to study how to change a country from values to transformation. Because the question is that in the past, the question that we had was, what did we do? Or how did we do? But the question, we have changed the question. The question is, why did we do what we did? That's the question. And so the method is different, because up to now, we studied a lot of things about strategic decisions, about normative mechanisms from the public administration, especially actions and transformation. But nowadays, more important than that is research about values, beliefs, narratives, and attitudes. So this is the change that we are making with a new method that we are presenting now in this moment. We are very happy today because we are presenting in this moment at Columbia University methodology with United Nations about this kind of new transformations from the traditional innovation approach to an open innovation platform approach. And we are presenting in this moment. The center is presented in this moment at Columbia University in New York. And the partners, this is the partners, Columbia University, then McGill University, and then London School of Economics. And the conclusion, our answer is learning to be. Learning to be. Learning to be. Because if we want to have our own answer, the question will be, of course, on research, development, and innovation. But especially the key. The K is the key. You have to add your K of culture to have your answer. And the only way out is this, is all together or not at all. And we are here in this moment, in this ongoing journey. Thank you very much.
So, a fascinating look at the tour of a people's evolution over the last several decades. I particularly thought the statistics of how the education distribution had changed so much in several decades was fascinating. So we have a few questions for you. And they go back to the history and the culture and the security of the Basque Country. So the first one is obvious. As Bill mentioned in his introduction, there was part of your original plan that talked about the possibility of eventually becoming an independent entity, an independent nation. Where does that stand, and how does that work both with Spain and with your people in France?
Well, I think that in relationship with this question, the problem is not the idea of nation that you have. The problem is democracy, and a democratic problem.
Okay.
And it's, and it's the will of the Basque society, the key to define the future. But not only, but because we are a people with three decision regions or states. It is impossible to impose from the Basque community to Navarra, or from Navarra to the Pays Basque in France. So we have to define in three different countries or parts of a country or regions of a country. The Basque Country is one country, but we live divided in three communities in two states, and of course the decision is like people, but in three different parts of this country, and probably the time will be different, and the process will be different in the Basque community or in Navarra or in the Basque community in the French state. And in relationship with the Spanish state, I remember the negotiations with the last two that I did with the last two Spanish presidents, with Aznar, first from Popular Party, José María Aznar, and with Rodríguez Zapatero from the Socialist Party. And I remember that my argument was, well, I can't understand the position of the Spanish government. You are willing to share sovereignty with Latvia, with Estonia, with Luxembourg, with a lot of countries like that, but you are not willing to share sovereignty with Catalonia or with the Basque Country. Why? Because this is the question. There is no answer to this question. Because the problem is that the question of Catalonia and the Basque Country are the most important question in terms of electoral issue in the Spanish, in relationship with the Spanish elections. This is the question. But the key is not the idea of nation, but the democracy.
But the democracy. Excellent. We're the National Security Forum, and so I would be remiss if we didn't address the issues that the Basque people have dealt with over the decades, in particular, as Bill mentioned, ETA and the history of violent nationalism. We're in a very different position in the world now. We just witnessed one of the worst nationalistic attacks in New Zealand. How do you reconcile national identity with nationalism when it's extreme and it's violent, and yet has maybe the same objectives that you do, but takes a violent tact? So what does national identity look like to you, and how do you move your national identity forward without violence?
Well, this is the problem with, especially through the Spanish media and through the debate of the political parties in Spain, because you have to consider that ETA was born in the 50s, 1950s, 57, 58, more or less. Was born in the 50s, in the last century, in 1957, in concrete. But the democratic replication of the Basque people has more than 200 years. So before ETA, during ETA, and after ETA, we need to reach an agreement, a political agreement, between Spain and the Basque Country, between Spain and Catalonia. And sometimes these questions are completely missed all around the world, abroad. Because for the Spanish political parties, it was very important to establish a positive relationship between nationalism and the violence of ETA. But if you want to solve the problem, it's necessary to divide completely this problem. One thing is the violence of ETA, who was born in the 50s, and other thing, completely different, is the democratic reivindication of the Basque Country during the last 200 years. It's necessary not to mix these two things.
But you succeeded in having ETA disarm. How did that work? Why did they do it? Why did they step back from the violence that they were promoting, even though independence was not achieved?
Well, I don't know, because it was their decision. In fact, I remember that ETA spoke with all the Spanish presidents, but not with the Lendakaris. You know? And we realized within the Basque Country that was very difficult do things against ETA or to solve the problem of ETA. But in our hands was the possibility to define a project for sustainable human development. And if you define that, the consequence is that it's impossible to have violence in your society. But it's very clear, and sometimes we don't repair about that. But ETA negotiated with all the Spanish presidents, with all of them, with first was this UCD, UCD president was Suarez, Adolfo Suarez. The second one, Felipe González. The third one, José María Aznar. The fourth, Zapatero. With all of them.
But not
with the Lendakaris. We know one.
Not with the presidents of the Basque countries. Fascinating.
Sometimes the question was, I remember the conversations with the Spanish president, no? And I remember when I told to Aznar and to Zapatero that I can't understand why they were willing to negotiate about the self-determination principle with ETA and not with the Basque democratic political parties and institutions. That's the question.
Fascinating.
Because they negotiate, as you know, about the self-determination principle with ETA, but not with the Basque democratic institutions.
Fascinating.
It's curious, huh?
So, Bill, bring us home to Nevada. The president very articulately mentioned the diaspora of the Basque people. How does, outside of Spain and France, how does the Basque identity, the Basque culture get preserved in areas in the diaspora or diasporas?
I don't think we really don't.
There you go.
Okay, we really don't have time for me to answer that question properly, but I would say that the very fact that we're even talking about a Basque country is sort of an historical miracle. Given all of the pressures that the Basque country has experienced in Europe, in the European homeland, and then also given all of the pressures that any immigrant group experiences in host societies wherever they immigrate to assimilate, it is a bit of a miracle that we're talking about a Basque country and the various Basque diasporas around the world. Do I have a real explanation for that? No, other than the fact that Basques have demonstrated historical stubbornness regarding their identity and commitment to their identity that is probably, I wouldn't say unique, but it is exceptional. And Basques have emigrated to virtually every inhabited continent on the planet, and they are linked together. They have every year, every 4 years, I think it is, or 5, they have a Congress of Basque collectivities in the world in which they bring back representatives from the 175 or so Basque clubs and cultural associations and whatnot from around the world. And they meet for a week in the Basque country, and they discuss ways in which the Basque government, particularly it gets sponsored by the Basque government, but ways in which the Basque government can continue to foster and foment Basque culture abroad in the many, many diasporas around the world. And in fact, Juan Jose made a reference to something that I said. I was asked to give the sort of opening address at the very first Basque conference, and at that time I called my address, I gave the title Noragoas, which in Basque means where are we headed, where are we going? And that has become kind of a mantra or theme for all of the subsequent conferences, and they continue to debate that now regularly every 2 decades, well, for the last 2 decades. And as President Ibarrexte said at the beginning, this whole question of the formation of Basque identity in some respects is still unresolved, which is to say that it will always be a work in progress. It's not something that you achieve and then say, wow, that's great, now we can move on to something else. But, of course, the whole thrust of what he was saying today is that without identity, without buy-in by the local culture and its language and sustenance of all of that, economic development won't work because the people who are going to be most affected by it will not buy in. And that's really what we're talking about here today. Thank you.
So 2 questions for you. First, one on the political system and then one on the economic system. What is the structure of the Basque presidency. So you're president of the Basque Nation. That is the sectors that are within Spain, correct? How does it work? How are you elected? What is the political structure that you have put in place for your democratic system?
Yes, it's a parliamentary system in which people choose the different parliamentaries from different regions, and it is the same in the case of the Basque Country, the Basque Community, and Navarra. And then the Basque Parliament and the court, in the case of Navarra, choose their president. In the case of the Basque Country, is called Lehendakari. But the system is a parliamentary system, and the mandate is for 4 years.
So your presidential term is 4 years?
Well, I was for 3 periods.
Oh, you were for, okay, you served for 3 terms. Excellent, thank you. Okay, so now to the economics, which I know is your forte. We're hearing a lot about Brexit. So this is moving the UK maybe out of Europe, maybe not, we don't know. It may have changed since I've been sitting here. Is there going to be an impact? I mean, we've heard the Brexit discussions impacting all sorts of elements in Europe, including, not the least of which, Gibraltar. What does the Basque Country, what do they think of Brexit, and will it have an impact on them economically?
Well, there are a lot of studies about the Brexit, you know? But anyway, I think that the most important impact, of course, we will have an economic impact, but an effective economic. But the most important question is the affective impact, because the lack of union is the problem for the European Union. In this moment, we are not Europe, we are not an union. We are not in a European Union. And this is the problem for the real problem for the European Union. I think that more important than the effective impact in economic terms is the affective impact in our minds, because it's like a failed project in this moment, but not only for the British people, but for the European Union as a whole. The problem for the European Union is that it's very difficult to have this union with the current state's position, because they want to defend their state, and always they use the idea of Europe to explain the negative, what is the idea of union for their economies, and so and so and so. I think that the European Union is, from an economic and political point of view, an important project for all the countries in the European countries. Some of them are inside. The case of up to now, the case of United Kingdom, and others are outside. The case of Norway, or the case of Sweden, for example. But I think that the idea of the European Union is important for Europe as a whole, not only for the members of the European Union. So the Brexit could be very bad, not only for the European Union, but for the members of the European Union, and not only that, for other European countries that are not inside within the European Union, like Norway or Switzerland.
Excellent, thank you. Well, you gave us a fascinating view of how human development and human society can advance in modern times with the challenges that we're facing, both economically, environmentally, politically, and security-wise. And I appreciate, and I think we all appreciate, your insight from a very different perspective. So thank you, President Ibarrexte, for introducing us to another way of looking at the world. We're very grateful.